everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second installment of the PDS 2021 quarterly webinar series. My name is Jennifer Vinson, and I'm the Director of Marketing for PDS Consulting Solutions. Today, I'm joined by PDS CEO Kenneth Parsons and Tommy Britton, PDS Lead SME in Materials and Advanced Manufacturing. In today's webinar, Kenneth and Tommy will be discussing the hot topic of digital transformation of the shop floor using Deltek Costpoint Manufacturing. And Kenneth, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Jennifer. We are happy to be here today with this webinar, as Jennifer said, talking about digital transformation of the shop floor, especially in combination with Deltek Costpoint Manufacturing. So today we're going to start off with just kind of a definition of digital transformation. I know it's kind of a hot topic right now and there's a lot of definitions flying around, but it's always good to kind of revisit that. Digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies to create new or modify existing business processes. Also your culture, your customer experiences, and the main thing is to meet changing business and market requirements so that you can deliver on demand to your customers. So why digital transformation? An abbreviation there, DT is the acronym, as you'll see throughout the webinar. So digital transformation creates a system for gathering data for business intelligence, which is basically at this point the point that we're trying to get to through everything with all areas of our businesses, from HR to just general accounting to the manufacturing, all the way through to the shop floor. So basically it's to get business intelligence at a higher level that can be shared by different organizational units across all your companies, organizations, even if you've got segmented legal entities within a hierarchical company, basically to tie in all of these various touch points. So the key elements of digital transformation today are basically to stay on top of technology, to get the most innovative technology, meaning your ERP, your accounting system with all your add-ons that do all your management reporting for you, your financial analyticals, your project control systems, the latest technology using the most advanced systems there for data management. So data management being the next key element of the transformation is the process flow of that data, all the various systems and how they talk to each other to make sure that you're using the most current systems that are out there. That helps you, thirdly, to be able to look at your business processes, which you, in some cases, depending upon the systems that you're using, legacy systems that you're migrating from, your business processes probably in most cases are going to need to be overhauled. Then the fourth element, obviously, is organizational change management. Change management being the biggest key to any change that we go through today in any system migration, transition as we go through the process. So those four areas, your technology, how data is managed, your business processes, and then of course your organizational change management throughout the processes with all of your teams across all of your units are the key elements of what we're going to be looking at as far as digital transformation. So a winning strategy that is pretty consistent across the board today, as we've been looking at this over the past year and really getting more into this during COVID. It really brought this to the bubbled it all to the top where everyone was working from home. The cloud became very important. Within PDS, we have cloud solutions, and it was a very easy transition for us during COVID to be able to move a lot of our operations into the cloud. But the main thing there is having an overall strategy for digital transformation that includes all of these different elements. And the first thing from really the get-go as far as your strategy is to secure buy-in from the top down of your company all the way down to the shop floor, to the user. So the key part there is, once again, ties back into organizational change management, getting the buy-in throughout the company. The next part of your strategy that you really want to look at and focus on, obviously, is your current state. What legacy systems you're working from that you might need to upgrade or move, as the previous slide said, into newer technologies. But you want to have an overall business assessment of the current state so that you can identify, thirdly here, the goals that you need to move to with digital transformation. And at that point, then you can perform and should perform a gap analysis to see what's missing from the current state to the new identified goals that you want to reach with your transition strategy. And then the most critical part, I think, of the strategy to get on paper and to start documenting actually is the digital roadmap. And so the digital roadmap basically provides you the overall process that you're going to go through here to get to digital transformation. You're going to, first of all, as we mentioned before in the previous slide, you're going to do some serious due diligence of your current business processes. The one thing that you want to really focus on and be, very honest about is what you're doing now that needs to be changed, that is either on an archaic system, it's paper trail, snail mail, whatever it is, that you want to update your processes to be able to bring them to the most innovative technology processing of data that you can possibly get to. And that idea will help you identify at that point the technology requirements that you need, meaning what systems need to be updated. Do you need a new ERP? Do you need to go to the cloud to do this? Is your team going to continue to work at home? Now, COVID has kind of changed us as far as our work at home strategy. A lot of companies today are going to continue to stay working at home. So you may need to move some of this to the cloud versus having it on premise where you can only reach it when you're in the office. So looking at technology is a key element here. Obviously, once you have done that, you've looked at your business processes and the technology requirements, you want to create a plan. And once you've created a plan, then the next thing that you need to do is truly sit down with management and come up with the budget and get overall buy-in and approval from them so that you can start executing the transition to the new processes. And within that, working with your team and training them in regards to change management of the processes that they're working on that need to be overhauled and updated. And then finally, on the digital roadmap, the main thing that you want to focus on there is to look at the return of investment there that you've done with your updated processes. Start doing project management as you're going through the process to look at it in your financials, in your data reporting. And as we move through the rest of the webinar, Tommy's going to focus on how, obviously, the main part of this webinar is going to be focusing on the shop floor, but how we can move from paperless to digital and how that will increase our ROI. So at this point, I'm going to let Tommy take it from here and talk to you about shop floor and what you can do as we're a partner with Deltek. A sole partner, we only implement and support Deltek Costpoint, the full ERP, with our focus and emphasis in the manufacturing suite and advanced manufacturing. So Tommy, at this point, I'll give it to you.
Thank you, Kenneth. On my first slide here, I want to focus on some thoughts of how we would apply the concepts that you were just discussing in an overall transformation from a paper environment to a paperless or digital environment, and how we would use advanced tools to do that. Within the Deltek suite, in addition to Costpoint, obviously there is an integration with Solumina from iBase-T, which is an advanced shop floor management or execution system. There's integration with shop floor time for timekeeping and employee timesheets. And we look at all of those tools as possible improvements to a process. So how do we eliminate the paper and streamline the process and make that a digital environment? So one of the key things is to recognize that you have to examine the existing business processes and how they're executed. Literally, are they on paper? Is it a short walk from office A to office B? What is being done, and how would our automated tools, our digital transformation tools, allow us to work more efficiently, more effectively, and still satisfy our customer requirements and optimize our business operations? So I've identified some examples of exactly how Deltek addresses some of these issues that traditionally came from a paper environment. Number one, how are employees trained? So we're talking about the shop floor, we're talking about some type of manufacturing, assembly, or integration operation. How are the technicians trained? Where is the record of their training classes that they have completed, the certifications they've received? Who is holding that? Traditionally, it was HR. If an employee had a training class, HR recorded the training class and it went into a paper file in HR. So in the future environment, is that still going to be maintained off-site, away from the shop floor, or is it going to be information that is readily available to the shop management to know who's been trained, who has the required skills? Are they certified? If a technician is working on a satellite, do they have NASA certification for soldering joints, or do we need to get a different employee in there? So how is that managed? If we can get away from a paper process, the tools we have available now are smart enough to say, hey, you are the technician logged into this instruction. You're following this instruction set that says you need to solder this joint. And we've evaluated and validated that you are an employee that is eligible to perform that operation. You have the skills, you have the certifications, and we're also going to match the tools, the solder station. Has it been calibrated? Yes, we know exactly which solder station you're using on this operation because you've selected it in your work instruction. And so the system can actually validate that every check is checked, every box is checked, and that we're using the right employee, the right skill, the right certification, the correct tools, they're calibrated. And in the future, we will be able to prove it because it's all a part of the digital record of the assembly instruction. So when we look at the transformation from a paper-based environment, that there's a set of records or a list of employees who can do certain things, we're carrying that way beyond so that a supervisor doesn't have to manually check who's working on which operations all day long to make sure the right people are working them. The system can validate that the right person is working the operation, and we have a digital record that can prove it after the fact, that the tool that was used was calibrated, it was the right size, it was the right measurement. So that's very important. And these benefits are takeaways from transitioning from a paper-based system to a digital environment where things are online at a terminal on a screen rather than a piece of paper that can get lost. When we're done with the job, when we add up all of the different tasks and employees that worked on it, we have a set of digital records that are unaltered. They're part of your audit trail, as opposed to a slip of paper that got misplaced and is not part of the file that goes in a file drawer in the quality control department. So these are all important aspects, and they start with analyzing how you're conducting the business now and what tools you use to execute each requirement. So that kind of takes us to the next stage, which is the digital shop floor itself. The work, how is the work managed? So do we have version control? If we're assembling from a drawing, where are the drawings? It's not so long ago that I remember finding technicians that had squirreled away their favorite drawings with all the markings and everything, and they tucked them away in a drawer hidden. So the next time they built that unit, they pulled out their favorite drawings instead of using the official drawings from the vault. So where are you managing version control on your drawings, from whether it's a customer provided drawing or an internal design department? How do the drawings get to the shop? what validations are in place to make sure those are the actual drawings that are being used during the assembly or integration steps. And going along with the drawings, what kind of work instructions do you have? Are they printed books that technician has to sign and put initials, and a QC inspector has to come put a stamp on it and then file away those books? Or are these digital records that are being completed as the steps are being performed? And similar to the slide before, we're creating a digital footprint that says this operator did this step, it was inspected by this inspector who said it was passed, and that becomes a part of that permanent audit trail as a record on each individual work order based upon those digital instructions. Assembly drawings can be viewable right there on screen, or takeoffs, small views of a drawing that are pertinent to one particular operation step. It's much easier to manage those and keep them up to date with the latest records, because you're getting closer to the source files rather than several generations of workbooks that might have been used in the past. So in order to deploy this, it's not just a matter of buy some software, install it, and start using it. It's still part of the business process evaluation. How have we run the business in the past, and how can we use these tools to streamline processes, make process more accurate and complete, and verify to our customers that we've done exactly what our contract specifications require. And so that takes us to, what if something goes wrong? There has to be some planned corrective action. Obviously, we all want everything to go perfectly right and correct the first time. The best way to have a good product is to build it right the first time. But inevitably, the real world strikes and something breaks or is broken or is found to have a latent defect. So what are your corrective actions? In a paper environment, who writes down the instructions, and how do you know those amended instructions are part of the work package that gets filed away? If you're in a digital environment, you're going to have directed instructions for the technician that QA and engineering or manufacturing engineering prepares to say how to correct this deficiency. You're going to have documented actions that the technician did a certain thing. By collecting that data as a set of data points, you have the ability to perform trend analysis to find out if this is a one-time event, or if this is a trend that needs attention in designs or from a systems engineering point of view. You have documented amended instructions, and you can ensure that you're adhering to your specifications that are required by your contract and other requirements, internal and external. And as I noted, you also come up with an audit trail. You have documented within the work instructions as digital records that are permanently stored exactly what happened, how it got completed, and it's always tied back to the original order. It's integrated to the original order that encountered the discrepant material or the defect or the rework requirement. So there's no separation of what happened in a rework environment versus the initial production environment. So let's take a look at the labor itself, how a digital environment can improve your labor tracking and utilization. As I started off in an earlier slide, some of the controls that you can impose on the system as opposed to an individual is the right employee working the job. Well, when an employee logs onto their workstation and logs onto a specific operation, that login time, that start time, can be sent to time collection, to the shop floor time application as a start time. When they complete the operation and they log off to log to the next operation, that sends a stop or start time to shop floor time to record the actual labor efforts. So we're automating that process in a very accurate manner to keep track of how much labor is being spent on each step, whether it's the technician or an inspector or whoever. Part of that process was also the embedded authentication or validation that the employee has the skill to perform that particular operation. And if certifications are required, that they also not only have training, but they also have the required certifications at the right level for that particular operation. The system can prevent the employee from logging onto the next operation if a particular step hasn't been completed successfully or if it hasn't been inspected. So again, we're ensuring that the operation instructions are followed exactly by instilling those controls into the system where it's enforced there and not dependent upon somebody remembering to come by and check on a technician or a workstation. Those real-time updates going into Costpoint are helpful too, because at any time you can go into Costpoint to a manufacturing order and check on all of the labor that's been charged, all the materials that have been consumed, and so forth, and check on that status in Costpoint. Costpoint is always the point of cost records. It's the book of records for everything going on in the shop. So these integration points are taking it out of your digital shop environment and passing that information back to Costpoint in real time. So other people in the company have benefit of that information. Besides labor, we also have materials to deal with. So our materials integration with Costpoint can be part of this operation. The advanced manufacturing uses Costpoint inventory. We have a record of consumption that's synchronized with the Costpoint record. And so we have a record of what material was consumed. And if you go to the next slide, the material that's consumed in the shop floor application is being recorded in inventory to make sure that Costpoint is managing the cost and keeping those records synchronized between the advanced environment, the digital environment, and the traditional Costpoint bookkeeping. So all of our cost controls are fully integrated. We're not using two separate independent systems. We're using one integrated environment to do the shop management as well as the cost tracking for labor, material, vendor services, and so forth. And as a byproduct of this integration with materials, we have a customizable as-built configuration reporting that we can pull out of the system. That's also part of that digital record. So we know exactly what parts were used, what parts were taken out and replaced with what parts. So we have not only a complete history, but also an as-built end report identifying what was actually shipped. And that can be, top down, the entire product that's being developed. So I'd like to just summarize with a few points here that highlight the things that Kenneth brought up at the beginning of this session. My emphasis is that the technology is available to support the business. It's not the other way around. The business isn't supposed to find out how to use the technology. The business should be able to run as a productive, effective business. The technology should be able to support that business and improve processes, enhance processes. Sometimes the enhancement is not a savings of time. It takes the same time to do it as it did before, but you have more data available to make better business decisions downstream that you did not have before, or that were very time consuming to reach. The transformation needs to embrace and protect the process data. There's no point in burying data in a spreadsheet and call that a digital process when somebody could actually overwrite the spreadsheet, or it doesn't get backed up, gets modified, and then you have no change history. So the process data itself, the data points that are collected during manufacturing, the technology needs to ensure that that data is protected and is always available downstream as needed to pull back, whether for an audit or lessons learned or reduced learning curves. There's a lot of availability of business improvements as a result of having that detailed data available. And then the technology needs to enhance and improve the business processes. So there should be some gain. In some cases, the gain will be a reduction in cost. And so that certainly helps the ROI. In other cases, it may not actually be a reduction in cost, but it may be improved data for planning and training in the future, which may downstream have a cost savings by reducing training times, reducing learning times, reducing time to develop custom reports based upon having more data to pull from. So the business process is the key there. And from the earlier discussion Kenneth had, the business process is the beginning. How do we analyze what we're doing, and does it make sense, or could we do it more efficiently? Lastly, the organizational change concept. Kenneth talked a little bit about HR. You know, it's not too many years ago, I remember having to walk to HR, pick up the phone and call HR and say, hey, does this particular technician have training in this particular area? Or did this person ever get their NASA solder certification? Because there wasn't any record of that in the shop, and we needed to know, could we use this technician to do that particular task? Well, now it's embedded in the software. It's embedded in the application that, yes, when a person logs in to do a job, it's there. So the question is, how do you facilitate that? It's not as easy just buying software and saying, okay, make it work. Who is the organization that's going to be keeping track of employee training and employee certifications? Is it still going to be HR? Do they reach into the advanced applications and record that information where it's available in the shop floor environment? Or does that responsibility shift to manufacturing management so that they are the keeper of the individual employee records relative to their shop qualifications? So these are all things that are part of that business evaluation. It's not so much reverse engineering, it's just a matter of reevaluating what organizations are responsible for what activities. So in order to facilitate this on the shop floor, purchasing is involved, HR is involved, accounting is involved, project management is certainly involved. All these different organizations have got to be a part of the planning of this in order to make a successful digital transformation. And so with that closing thought, I'll give it back to you, Kenneth, for your thoughts. And thank you for those who have joined us, and we hope to see you on a future session.
Thanks, Tommy. And probably one quick question. We've focused as we've gone through the webinar here, really, and as you wrapped up here with your last bullet, the organizational change management. And I know just in your experience and my experience and working together for quite a few years, I think the thing that I've seen, and just want to get your comments on it, is that there a lot of times at the user level, it's hard to pull them away from legacy systems and from old processes. And a lot of times as we go in with implementations and implementation service quotes and proposals, we try to put organizational change management training sessions in there, but it usually winds up being part of the implementation and training overall. But I think have both experienced the hesitancy by users at times to get them over the hurdle, to get away from legacy systems, especially archaic systems. Do you have any thoughts on that, about how to approach that with the users at that level to help them get a better buy-in from the start?
Well, yeah, I've certainly seen a lot of cases of resistance to change. And sometimes that's just a personality, that somebody who has an objection to change. Once they're doing it a certain way, they want to continue doing it that way. But more prominently, the concern seems to be, if this deployment or if this transformation or this implementation is successful, I'm going to lose my job because everything's going to be more efficient and people are going to go away and machines are going to replace us. And I'm afraid that's just a stereotype of an automation or a robotic environment where, people disappear from a manufacturing floor. In my experience, I've seen very few cases where employee counts are actually reduced. It's usually a case of employees are transitioned to a different task, or they simply learn a new way of doing what they were doing before and they're still doing it. Much of this technology is improved visibility of what's happening and better planning information. And I think it's important to convey to employees at the very beginning, right down to the grassroots level, that management wants to see the business improve. And at the executive level, the goal is make the business more productive. We want to be able to build more product with the same people we have, not have to hire more people just to build more product. So one of the goals is to make that communication between the executive management of a company and the grassroots in the company, that you might be asked to change the way you're doing something. You might even be transitioned to a new department. Somebody with accounting skills that's working in manufacturing might transition to a cost accounting position where they're analyzing business costs of manufacturing, but they're part of the finance department instead of the manufacturing department. Things like that I've seen frequently. Someone in accounting who is a good accountant, but they really want to get their hands dirty and they want to get in the shop doing something. Suddenly they get transitioned into the manufacturing organization. So I see a lot more of that than I see people losing their jobs. So I think communication is the big point there, to convey that here are our company goals. Our goals are not necessarily to reduce the headcount. Our goals are to improve the efficiency of employees, enhance your job skills, give you training opportunities to learn additional job skills or learn to use new tools, and then we'll be able to do more work with those tools. So that's kind of my take on that. I think it's a valid concern. I do see that concern in almost every implementation I've worked at, some concern to some extent. But the reality is it just doesn't materialize. The cost saving is not necessarily in reduction in labor. It's in reduction of overall costs and overheads to make the business work more efficiently. And I think that's what the takeaway is, that the communication is the goal to solve that fear.
Right, that's a perfect analogy. That's exactly where I was going with it. You know, if we can get them on the front end to buy into the change, that it's not basically going to remove them from a position, but it's probably going to just give them more time to do something that they haven't been able to do before and take it to the next level. So appreciate the information there, and a great summary here of the overall transformation process on the shop floor, especially using Deltek's Costpoint Advanced Manufacturing Suite. And with that, we'll wrap, and I'll pass it back to Jennifer. Thanks, Tommy.
Thank you, Kenneth.
Well, gentlemen, that was great. And Kenneth, you raised some great questions. And Tommy, as always, we appreciate your insight. And thank you for walking us through all of that. Before we completely wrap up, I'd like to remind everybody that if you have further questions, please feel free to reach out and email us at info@pdsconsults.com, or better yet, call us. Give us a call at 865-766-2092. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much. And as Tommy said, we hope to see you on another future session.
Thanks, Jennifer. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. You too.